We are live for another episode of Pursuit of Purpose. This is going to be another one of our episodes where we talk about truth, peace, and real talk. We're going to talk about some current topics, a very, very prevalent current topic that we deal with in our society. I believe it's dealt with globally, but we especially see a lot of it here in the United States.
For sure.
And we have a guest with us. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And our guest with us today, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Lacey, and I am a transgender individual.
So I've turned the screen so now everybody on TikTok can see the screen where they might not be able to see you in person. They can at least see the screen. So if you're out there and you're joining us live, Lacey has made it clear that we're available for questions and totally okay with being asked whatever, talking about whatever, basically like a no holds barred Q&A session, right?
Absolutely.
And we're going to be respectful. We're going to be kind and understanding, but we want to have real conversations. So if you would like to take this opportunity to meet Lacey and ask a question, maybe it's been difficult for you to ask a trans type question on your own in your culture and your group or your circles that you hang with, this is a chance for you to be able to do it. You can sit behind your keyboard and type your question. Yeah. And Lacey has been so gracious to be willing to participate. So we thank you for joining us on the show. And I'd like to ask you, what was your family life like growing up? What was childhood like for Lacey?
So childhood life, that starts down in Southern California with my grandparents and my parents. We were not fortunate in finances, but we were full of love and passion for one another. And now my father may have made some tough decisions. He raised us through the church, the Catholic Church. I remember going to Mass every Sunday with my grandmother, my grandfather, and my parents. You know, my grandparents would, on my mom's side, would occasionally be there because it was just down the road. Very small town. But, you know, they loved me very much. And growing up, I was always that kid that was pretty silent, thought to myself, you know, would sit there, you know, realizing who I am and what I like, and growing up, you know, being happy. Before I could really start to remember things, my father got into some types of addictions, alcoholism, and started down a path that wasn't the healthiest. So we ended up moving around a lot and going through some things. Now, I would never change anything of that because it has given me so much knowledge and insight to be able to understand more people and from more different lifestyles, because not everyone gets to live that fortunate life where the father is always present. My dad did change his lifestyle and turn things around after some time and has been a very strong figure in our family. My mom and dad are still together today. So when they moved out to Texas in 2013, I stayed in Las Vegas because we had migrated over there so he could get away from that type of, you know, similar places, similar events and things, so he can start to get into a better, healthier lifestyle. For me, I started realizing I didn't quite like everything that everyone else did. You know, for me, I didn't feel like the boy. I didn't want to play with all the boy toys. I liked dolls. I like, you know, the dresses. My sisters used to put me in dresses, and my parents always thought I was forced to do it. But really, I was like, can we play dress up? Can I wear one of your dresses? You know, and I was that little boy that really started to not understand, you know, what that meant or what that was like until I was an adult. My father was very strong in the church, so I had repercussions. He instilled different things for me. You know, he forced me to cut my hair. He started, you know, putting that type of lifestyle, taking me to church more. Whenever he caught me talking to a boy that, you know, as a child, you know, kids shouldn't be kissing, but I would think I was like 6 or 7 and me and this boy kissed. He saw it. I was reprimanded, and I started going to church every single day with my grandmother. And my grandmother would always tell me, you know, I love you very much. Be who you are. I'm only taking you so your father doesn't punish you more. That way, you know, she was like, God is there for you. God loves you. You do not have to be afraid of who you are. You can love who you want to love. Do not be afraid of that, but you're too young for that. She would always tell me, you're too little. Es un niño, es no bueno ahorita, right? Because she is Hispanic and she spoke Spanish. So she would say it to me and I would understand, and we didn't have a car. She didn't drive. So this was about a like 20-minute walk every day back and forth to the church. And I liked the walk. I got to smell the roses. We would stop by, get some stuff and things like that. So childhood growing up, I had those dark parts and I had the really good parts. As I got older, we started getting in, my dad got a job in construction, started working real good. And, we were rewarded for the things we did. I often had my chores, I learned how to work on cars because I did still like things like that. My great great grandfather on my mother's side rebuilt cars, rebuilt things like that. And I would love to go do things with that with him. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to drive a boat. And then I started learning how to ride motorcycles and dirt bikes and all that fun stuff. And that became an instilled part of me. The photo I sent over with you, that fox racing, that is part of that lifestyle. I still wear a lot of that clothing and I still go out dirt bike riding and stuff. I don't care about getting muddy and things like that. But I think it was around my middle school years, I started realizing I was not straight and I did not like girls the way normal people would at my age. But my siblings and my family, even though they were loving, there was some homophobic slurs, some bullying and things like that because we were grown up with tough love and tough teaching. So I was called things like that growing up. So I became very closeted and instilled internally because going through the Catholic Church and that I started to take those teachings probably not in the best light, and it started making me feel this type of internal disarray with myself, that I was wrong, something's wrong, I shouldn't feel this way. And it cycled into me falling into different types of drug uses, started with nicotine and then cannabis, moving on into high school whenever I started into heavier things like that. And I think it was at 15 and a half, I was arrested. And the list of the reasons why I was arrested, it goes on. It was like trespassing, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit crime, destruction of public property, possession of paraphernalia, evading and eluding. It went on. I was in a terrible path. And mind you, I was living as a straight person at this time. I had girlfriends. I constantly was doing that thing, but it was all this type of front to be like this masculine person, to be this quote unquote man or a boy and things like that. And it wasn't until after getting arrested and realizing and going into that system for a bit that these actions, these behaviors, trying to get to the root cause of them was the real understanding between the probation officers and the therapists and things like that. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old that I actually had my first real interaction with someone of the same gender. At that time, I was still identifying as male. And that's whenever I realized, yeah, I'm not interested in women the same way, I can be honest with myself. And my family didn't know. I had moved out. I was living on my own, going to school, working 2 different jobs, putting myself through that type of education that I wanted to get. And that was pretty much childhood growing up for me there. And that's where that is.
Well, I've got a big question for you. Something I picked out in your story is you were living on the street.
Living on the street when? As a child or?
No, sometime in your latter teen years. Did I catch that or did I miss something?
No, I was living on my own. So I had moved out. I was with roommates and stuff like that.
I thought you were alluding to possibly being homeless. And I was just going to ask how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But
I guess you could consider there were times where I had to go back to my parents' house and, let's sleep on a couch for a good few months to get back on my feet. Right. And there were times where it was really close. It was really close to being in that situation because in this economy that we've grown up in, most people are only one bad accident away from being homeless.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you now, Lacey?
I am 29.
Okay, so all this has happened pretty much in the last decade. Then you said about 19, you pretty much, individuated from your family and started to trying to build your own way, as an adult.
Right.
Did you, did you say something about school? Was there some post-high school things you got involved in, or was it just pretty much ended at high school and then it was self-taught? What was life like, kind of like, I guess, career-wise after that?
Career-wise, it has its patches, but I actually left high school at 16 and got my GED. I did
Okay.
test into the top 30 percentile of the US. The reason why I did that was I was stuck attending school. School was very unhealthy for me, especially with where we were living. It was really easy to fall back into those types of drugs. And I was really stepping away from the amphetamines and the ecstasy, those party drugs like Coke and stuff. The person I was with at the time, her name was Brittany. She was a really good influence on me for things. Her and I eventually had our falling outs and, we had come to our understandings. But, at the time, she really helped me realize better decisions for me, even no matter where I go in life, is going to be the ultimate choice. And so whenever I left school because I wasn't attending, I was doing my work, passing, but they revoked all of my credits for my junior year. We're going to force me to retake the year because I had unexcused absences. Even though I had A's, B's, and C's and I passed all of the exams, I was literally one of the higher educated, students on the list there of the, whenever you get your ratings and stuff. I was on that. I think I was in the top 10% there for the classes. But I was like not going to repeat a year. So I told my parents, let's go down to the adult department. I'll just take my GED. Here's the money. Because at the time I was working at Sonic, so I could pay for it myself. And they were like, okay, as long as you get that, then we don't care.
So it really just came down to an attendance problem, not really behavior at school or nothing like that. It was just you were not here enough.
Behaviors. So I had my behaviors in school. I was really raised not to stand down, not to start fights, but always finish them. So it happened quite often where someone would say something offensive, or because even in high school, even though I was internally conflicted, I stood up for the community and things, people that were getting bullied for their identities or the people that they're attracted to and things like that. Anytime I saw something like that, I would be like, hey, you need to step off, back up.
Okay.
And most of the time, boys in high school won't do that. They'll step up. And so that's where I would antagonize it and they throw the first swing. And then next thing you know, they're on the ground. I'm getting suspended. And it wasn't the best option for me to stay in school.
Right. So I guess in our society, this was around 08, 09, 2010, somewhere around in there. And
Correct.
so if I'm following you, and you're doing very well, keeping us on track time wise, like you had not, I guess you could say, presented yourself as same sex attraction, although you had them. That was still something you were keeping behind the veil, even though you were coming out and defending those who were and were getting bullied for it. That's kind of what it sounded like to me. Is that about right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay.
So at what age did you begin openly practicing, like being open about who you are and who you believe you are and your lifestyle?
So at 19 was when my first interaction happened. It wasn't until I was 21 years old. So for 3 years, I was renting a room from somebody. She was a very huge influence on my life. She helped me get more connected with God and religion and, understanding different things as a gay person, because she herself was lesbian. She had her 2 kids and she was divorced from her wife, her wife is a wonderful person. They have such a great co-parenting style and even still do today. But, I just kept, that private. I didn't tell my family. I didn't post on social medias. I was at a local bar in the area in Las Vegas, and my sister, who has a lot of friends there at the time who were lesbian and gay and stuff, she ended up popping into a bar that I was currently at, and she saw me, and I was with a couple guys, and there was no way to really explain it, because the situation she came in, she saw, and I heard her say my name. I look up, I see her, and the 2 guys that were just with me, I push off. I know my card is on the tab. I leave through the back. I've only had 2 or 3 drinks at this point. And so I get in my car and I just drive home, turned my phone off, drove home, and I go to my roommate and I'm like, my sister just walked in on the bar with me while I was kind of flirting with 2 guys. What do I do? And she was like, well, we had that whole conversation of, well, you have to decide, are you going to tell your family? Because they're going to know. They're going to know at this point. There's no hiding what just happened. And so I turned my phone back on. sister is blowing me up, and may she rest in peace. But I answered the call. We meet at a local bar, a different bar near us, where we both kind of lived near each other. And we started talking, and I told her, what do you want to know? And she's like, well, are you gay? Like, I want to know, like, what did I just see? What did I just walk in on? And I'm like, yes, I am gay. I am not actively seeking out any women relationships. I am exploring that lifestyle. And she was like, okay. And she's like, can I tell people? And I was like, no, I do not want you to tell anybody. The next morning, my phone's blowing up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, mom, dad, sister, other brother, calling, asking. She went out with her friends, got drunk, and of course ended up calling somebody. Thought she was like confiding in somebody because she could, and got out of everybody.
Right.
Now, it became a hard part for me because some family members did not agree with it. Others had a harder time coming to terms with it, and others were very loving and accepting of it. So it was one of those moments where I had started that exploration. And mind you, at 21 years old is whenever I did start an interest into makeup and started learning more about the community and identities. And that's whenever I did start going to different therapists and talking to them, and started realizing the dreams I was having. Whenever I'm sleeping and I had a dream, most people would dream like as the male or in things like that, and I would dream like, of having a family. Well, I would be pregnant and I would be female in my dreams 90% of the time. And that's how I felt all the time. I've never really been interested in the masculine clothes, because even in high school, I wouldn't wear masculine clothes. I started wearing skinny jeans in like 2008, before skinny jeans were really even a fad. So I did get bullied for that, and things like that. I would wear different clothes. I was that kind of punk skater emo kid with the long hair, gauges that were an inch wide, and had my lip pierced, my nose pierced. Those piercings I all did myself. And it was like, that was my style. And I still love that music, still love that style, still have the desire to get my piercings, but for professional reasons, we have taken them out.
Well, I'm very proud that you took it upon yourself to enter the professional world, and you saw that that was going to be a difficult thing for you to proceed professionally with that presentation. And you didn't decide that it was your employer's job to conform to you. You know what I mean? Like, we see so many times, like I had a conversation with a friend this morning, and he was at a hospital in the Houston area. And while he was there, a trans person came in the room with the hair, like this rainbow colored, extremely bright hair, and all of these things, face jewelry and things like that. And, it doesn't, I'm going to throw out an opinion. Okay. And this is not meant to be insulting or anything like that. But I would think if I was a member of that community, that wouldn't be a great representation.
I can understand that.
Like that you would be so, I don't know how to put it into words. I don't think flamboyant, maybe that's the right way to put it, but so aggressive with your style, I guess to say. So I don't know, aggressive with the style as so much to be like daring someone to say something is almost how it comes out. Like it's so attention seeking is what it looks like in that regard. Not you. Like I say, I'm very impressed that you took it upon yourself to be professional. That's really good. That's to your credit. And so what do you think is the difference? What do you think makes people in that community do that?
So for everyone, it's a little different. And sometimes it is just personal taste, but I can see how it could be attention seeking and, that type of like in your face, like, this is who I am, take it as it is. It's that aggressive standpoint based off of your, look there. For me in high school, obviously, we had a lot of internal struggles and a lot of internal battles that I was going through. So that type of look for me kind of just helped me feel what I was feeling outside on the outside. It looks struggled, battled, hardened. It makes me feel like if someone were to look at me, they wouldn't want to mess with me. They wouldn't want to say something. That's kind of what it was for me. Now, for everyone else, it's going to be different. Someone could just be like, no, I just really like it. Like, it's really just nice for me. And it looks really great on some people, you know? Of course, whenever we go extra and you start seeing like 6, 7 different piercings and you got like all this other stuff going on, it's like, even I can be like, what? I mean, to each their own, but.
So Lacey, I've got a guy on TikTok. His TikTok handle is Tim the Trucker. And he said, is this a fake podcast? Is there anything
fake podcast?
Yeah. Tim the Trucker wants to know, is this a fake podcast?
It might be. I don't know. This is a fully real podcast. I've watched it a few times. I actually really enjoy the interactions you guys have had, because even if I have a differing opinion, you are very respectful about the way you go about it. And I think that's what is kind of throwing people off, is the level of respect between us is really high. And it's just because that's what I feel the world really needs, is respect.
So I'm gonna make a statement, and this is not something that I'm gonna throw at you as a challenge to reply to. I just want to put something out there for the viewing audience and the listening audience. I want them to hear something, okay? Because it's important to understand where we're coming from. I am a Christian. I am a conservative. I am a constitutional conservative. Mm-hmm. Okay? And what I want the audience to see is that I may not want to live the way that Lacey lives, but I respect Lacey as a person. Mm-hmm. I respect Lacey enough to be willing to, on air, in person, have an open conversation that is unprepared, unrehearsed, and unknown what is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm not afraid of that at all. And I'm willing to have anyone on this show and have these conversations so that we can better understand each other, so we can better work together and move forward for a future together.
Yes.
Not so divided. You can be different. You can live different. You can look different. You can act different. Mm-hmm. You can even love different. And it doesn't affect me. I can still love you as a person without agreeing with what you do behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. That's not my business.
That's right.
So to answer that question, is this a fake podcast? In my opinion, which may be a little biased, but this is about the realest podcast
right.
a person could take part in.
That's right.
Because there are no off limits questions, and we talked about that when we started. Mm-hmm. You guys can ask anything, you can say anything, and we'll answer to the best of our ability without getting banned. You know,
that's right.
That's the best we can do. So, Lacey, thank you for putting yourself out there and for being so respectful.
Right.
So, Chuck, what do you got?
A couple of things. And yes, I definitely echo Rob. Thank you, Lacey. It's not beyond insightful, very courageous, and just more to respect. But I will say, having people in my family, and this would be the generation after me, like I was raised a lot like you were raised, which is, we're very serious attenders come Sunday and all those sorts of things. And you hear a lot of things in those assemblies that are for that purpose. But what they don't teach you, and I think you experienced it, I know we experienced it in our family, is they don't teach you how to love people who don't live as you live. So in that next generation, that would be my children's age, we have a lot of folks who have chosen same-sex relationships. And when asked about it by people that I used to sit in the pews with, they one of the first questions consistently, Lacey, they would go, "What did you do?" And I go, "What do you mean?" "Well, what did you do?" And I said, "Well, I love them. They're our children." I love. And they're like, "Well, of course." I go, "Well, past that, it doesn't really matter." And it was always interesting to challenge folks who wanted to be, I guess, hurt by our generational choices there. They would be right about your age range. But once they realized it's not a hurtful thing, then they had nowhere to go. And I always kind of enjoyed doing that, not in a, don't talk about my family member that way. I didn't get defensive. I just challenged them. Do you love or do you not love? Because you say you do. And that was always fun to do. And I say fun, I don't mean like I got a kick out of it, but it was fun in a kind of a help them grow type of way. And to echo the political position that Rob was espousing, we probably lean very libertarian. And in a libertarian type of mentality, nobody cares who you choose to love. All we care is that your people are good, healthy citizens doing things the healthy way, like working and paying our taxes and, not driving crazy on the highway, the things that are healthy. Past that, no, nobody cares, and not in a I don't care about people way, like if that's how people choose to live. And I hope you're experiencing more of that in your life, especially now as an adult, creeping up on 30. I heard that, so be careful.
I was avoiding that one. It's right around the corner. It is this year, and it's pretty soon. So
once you roll the third decade, brother, you can't go backwards. I'm just saying. So enjoy your 29. But anyway, I hope that kind of helps you better understand. I hope our audience better understands where we're coming from, as a little bit more calendared men than that. Yeah. 40s and 50s, but more on that later. The show's not about us, but anyway, thank you. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of that. It's really having those relationships, especially with other generations and their challenges, it helped me grow. And I hope that's what I'm able to share. Now, my other thing was about being a therapist. I've been a therapist for about 30 years. And when we were talking earlier about some of the folks who express themselves in kind of louder or obvious ways. And my first thought as a therapist, right or wrong, and I'm willing to be challenged, is there's a sense of insecurity that tends to come with observing those things. And it doesn't offend me. It bothers me for them to think, is that an issue? And I don't know, maybe you've seen it since you may spend more time in the community with people who may present themselves more in that way. Do you get that same sense maybe of possible insecurities? Maybe they're not fully grasping things. That's just been my observation about the folks who've come in my office. What would be your thoughts on that?
And I want to thank you both for, expressing yourselves and, welcoming me so warmly. I do see very similarly in a lot of topics. So thank you for that. But yeah, I do believe it comes from some types of insecurities. Again, everyone's different. So there are going to be those individuals they're very confident. They're very, happy with who they are and very loving of themselves, but they still, express themselves in that way just because that's their style. That's what they really enjoy. But for me, and a lot of people that I do interact with, of course, there is always that insecurity. Everyone has insecurities and everyone's going to express them differently. I'm sure you and Robert both have slight insecurities in some areas. Everyone has that feeling. Everyone has it. It's not anything to do with anybody being special. You're not special for having insecurities. You are always a special person for being loved and being part of our world and being, in the communities. Everyone has special, unique qualities, but there's certain things like insecurities that I learned through AA and stuff, with that hard life, having to fix those issues, that it was insecurities for me. It was, not being able to accept myself, still struggling with being able to look at myself in the mirror and be like, I love this person, and being like, I love you. And, that's one thing they started having, in that program, those 12 steps, you tell yourself you love yourself every single day, even if you don't believe it, because at some point, if you do it, you're going to start realizing you do believe it and you do love yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we have to do on our own. We can't do that for another person. I can't make another person do that. As well as a therapist, you can't make someone come to therapy. You can't see someone struggling and get them in, just drag them in. It's not going to do much good until they're willing to do the work outside of the sessions.
Right. That is so true. And in helping people learn how to love themselves, man, that's been one of the biggest challenges in this profession. I could teach, I could help people break things down, but I can't build their esteem. I can congratulate them and praise them, but if I can't attach that to true evidence, it's not going to stick. And so they really have to learn to give it to themselves. So have to learn to love themselves. And like you said, it starts with affirmations, but later, and sounds like you found evidence. Okay, I love myself for that. I love myself for this other thing. And then it just builds. And it sounds like that's kind of what happened for you. And then it sounds like you're trying to pass that on to other people that you run into.
Absolutely. Everyone I meet, anytime, anytime they're open to the discussion, I always let them know, for me, it's taken quite the many times of in and out, back and forth. I mean, I started that first time I ever stepped into an AA meeting. I was 23, 24 years old. And even before that, I was still, I went to the counselors, I went to talk with people. It wasn't until like, recent years, like it can take decades. Everyone's timeline is different. For me, I'm thankful I started getting a little bit more of a grasp later on and maturing in with it. But now I'm in a point where I absolutely do love myself. I love my life, and there is always room for improvement. There's always ways to keep working with God and the universe, because I know you both mentioned being Christian. I would see myself more as a pantheist, or a pantheism, which is where I believe God and the universe are one. And, no matter where we are in the world, God is with us. He's in there with your room, with my room. My God can be a woman, yours can be male. Anybody's God, as long as you have that connection, as long as it could literally be a rock outside for you, as long as you give that feeling and that faith over to somebody to know that I don't have the power for the outcomes. I can do the work and I can do everything. But if I have an expectation for a set outcome, it's not guaranteed. Even if it says 100% guaranteed, there's no guarantee. We have to leave that in the hands of the universe and God, and let them do that work and thank them for it. And, keep taking the moments to listen to the signs to keep going. For me, I do work, as I mentioned earlier, with a rescue locally. I currently have 2 fosters under my care right now. Before, I've had 7 different bottle baby fosters that were only like neonatal kittens, and I set the data for 72 hours to just make sure they were feeding, and got through those first 72 hours. Now, only 1 got to stay here in the world with us. The others went off to be with our God and, spend their time where they need to be, because unfortunately in that lifestyle, the risks were just so high for them. But I am so thankful I was able to push through and at least get that 1 alive, keep them alive. And one of them, what I have now, it was a bottle baby at start. She was a bit older than what they were, so her chances were much better. And she's now eating wet food and kibble and things like that. So I take into my life ways to help the community, ways to help people, because that's what I really got out of AA. Even though I stepped away from the program when I moved out here to Texas, and I do drink still occasionally, because after a year or 2 of therapy, my therapist and I kind of understood it's not that you're addicted to alcohol. You were just running from the problem. And now that you're not running from the problem, if you want to drink, you can. And I found that I can drink very respectfully, 1, 2 beers, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then I won't even have anything for months at a time.
That's good. Yeah, I like the conclusions y'all came to. Like that alcohol wasn't the problem. Alcohol was just a symptom of the problem.
So I've got a very superficial question that when my wife's a school teacher, and she's not going to be able to watch live. They're on a field trip right now. They're out in the woods, in the big thicket, which is a part of.
Hopefully they aren't getting rained on, because we do have some rain up here in Lumberton right now.
That's what she was afraid of today. But she's going to ask this question. I know it, but it's very superficial and it may seem silly. But is that your real hair?
This is my real hair. Yes, this is all natural hair here.
She's going to be jealous because she has straight hair, which I think is, gorgeous. I think she's a beautiful lady, but she is constantly looking at people with hair like that. And, she's a little jealous of things like that. So I know she's going to ask me. So I figured I'd just go ahead and ask and let you give it the truth.
Yes.
But so I'm going to ask you a crazy question. What is it that you wish people from the Christian community would ask you to get to know you? What do you wish they would ask you?
That's actually a tough question. And I didn't think about you asking that question, because the past couple of days, whenever we talked about it, I thought, like, what kinds of questions is he going to ask? What would I be asked? That one I didn't think about.
I'm known for weird questions that people are stumped with.
That's a fact.
Right.
It's kind of my thing.
I think, honestly, the biggest question would be, are you happier this way? And that one, I am. I actually am. I'm able, from just the way my life has shown in the past history, even my aunts, my uncles, and the family members that struggled to really accept it, they were like, they have to admit this person is happier identifying differently. And that's where I am also different, because I would never force my identity on someone. If I'm in public and someone isn't comfortable referring to me as the opposite gender, that I identify as, that's okay. They don't have to, because that's their religion, their struggle there. That's not my struggle. And I've seen your post on your page, it's anyone can say anything to you or about you. It's all about how you take it and how you
Right.
work with it and what you're able to, overcome. For me, I don't have to be identified by everyone. Now, of course, there's a certain level where if someone's being kind of disrespectful about it, of course, it always depends on the tone. I'm not a person who's afraid of confrontation. I will absolutely stand my ground. I am very libertarian in my views. So I am a big believer of our amendments and our rights and our founding fathers. The Constitution is very strong in my life. I believe that it's there for a reason. It was developed for a reason. And in society today, we're looking at some very scary things that can very easily get you into a spiral of things on both sides. And the Christian community is an absolutely wonderful community. Now, it's very easy to be led in a bad direction depending on who's the forefront. I mean, we've seen that through history many times.
There's always
But-
extremes,
Yes.
and that's one of the things that the Bible actually teaches against, no matter what.
Right.
Anything too extreme is bad.
Yeah.
Anything,
Mhm.
whether it be
Yeah.
food, drink, religion,
Mhm.
whatever it is, too extreme
Right.
is bad.
Yeah.
And anything too extreme eventually leads to death,
Yes.
whether it be metaphorical or physical, it leads to
Yeah.
death. So in my life, I seek balance, and I've failed more times than I can count. But what I've always focused on is failing forward, learning from those failures and achieving, or at least working towards, balance. And that's what this conversation is hopefully going towards, helping to build balance. Conversation that can be had with seemingly opposing viewpoints. That value is brought to both sides without hate, without any kind of fight. Do you feel any friction today?
No, I feel very, comfortable. It feels like you both understand and are very loving and accepting of different lifestyles. Of course, we have those points where it's like we're all under the same laws, we're all under the same things. And my viewpoints on some things are going to be different than your viewpoints, especially, like life aspects. But to me, if it's something to me that sees so rudimentary where it's like, I like my curtains to be a dark blue. You might like them to be see-through and sheer. That's how I compare our lifestyles pretty
Well,
much.
I don't even
It's-
notice the curtains, so don't. I'd be like, wait, there was something on the windows?
There's something on the windows. You changed that?
One of the things that I do a lot of work with where there's more than one person in the room, couples, sometimes families. And I ask them, I say, do you guys argue? And they're like, oh, we hate to argue. I said, really? I said, why do you hate to argue? And so I have to start into this explanation about arguing, debating, discussing. They're really just to learn differences. They're really just to understand. But you fight to win. There's no other reason to fight. That's why we fight very infrequently, because it is a win-lose scenario. But what has troubled me most, and the events in the last few weeks have really brought that back to light, is since when is a difference a death penalty? I don't understand that, and not from a human perspective. I don't get that, and because we're not at war. So we're not fighting to defend our children back at home, and that are in safe places. But so if we're not in a declaration of war, since when does a difference become a death penalty? And I presume, you presented yourself as someone who's probably met with a lot of those death sentencing differences from people, and you're thinking, wow. I don't understand why you would hate me enough to want me to die for what I choose and how I choose. And I know maybe we've faced some of it, but empathetically, I'm sure you've probably faced more. And how have you dealt with that as someone who's definitely been faced with those options, or at least we're starting to trend toward those more permanent options of hurt and pain.
I appreciate you bringing that one up. The way I deal with it is, again, so for me, I stand my ground. If someone is that point, if I can, easily walk away or, make a point, I would never turn my back on an enemy. That is something I was trained and taught to do, is never turn your back on someone who's presenting themselves as an enemy.
Yeah.
And I would never want to have to, do anything. So at that point, it's like, look, you're free to believe what you want to believe. I enter it always with compassion. I can align with their feelings and their religion to a certain extent. And then I just assure them, hey, you feel that way, and that's the way you feel. And there are solutions. This may not be the best solution. It is a course you can take. But I can assure you, if you were to take action towards me, I trust that God has an outcome that is probably in my favor.
Right.
And that's where I stand, in those libertarian views. I don't believe that we should keep our fire extinguishers away from where a fire might be prevalent. So at any time, I am always with something to keep myself protected. And that's something that's important because I grew up, being taught safety measures, how to properly control myself and manage my emotions. And even whenever I was in my struggles, I still was able to keep myself from getting angry, getting, super upset and things like that. Of course, everyone has their moments where, life builds up and your temper boils over. But that is something I'm starting to become afraid of in my country. I love my country. I love my country people. I love international people. I love everyone around the world. And even those different opinions, especially Muslim opinions. I've studied the Muslim religion. I have Muslim friends, and they are very accepting of me. And I feel the media just pushes this idea to try and divide us, because at the end of the day, it's very easy for the communities to come together. We see that every single day. In most recent events, it's very easy for communities to come together, and it's very easy for the media to try and divide us. And it's very easy for that to happen because what we see in the media isn't what we always know, So down on the ground, especially in places like California, my uncle is a retired police officer. He was on the force in the town we grew up in for 15 years. He went through schooling in his last 5 years to become a lawyer and an attorney. So he represents officers that end up with cases, because people don't realize anytime a cop does anything that isn't considered protocol, or anytime someone actually places a complaint, there is a case. They open a case. There is a specific circuit in the courts that they go through. They're not in the public circuits for a reason, because it would really just prevent a lot of people from getting their cases seen if every single cop's case was on the same docket. But he's seeing an extremely alarming rise in cases happening, and it's getting concerning, especially because some of them are unwarranted, whereas others are more warranted. And some of these cases can become very, very misconstrued in the public eye. Everyone has the right to protest. Everyone has the right to stand up and speak out for what they believe in. Let's not destroy property. Let's not destroy other people's personal stuff, even if we disagree that they bought a Tesla. I don't agree with Elon Musk, and I would never buy a Tesla. I'm sorry. I am combustion motor all the way. I love the sound of a motor. I love driving a standard model. There's nothing better than filling the gate of a 6-speed.
That's your background. You're a mechanic, man.
Well, exactly. I'll tell you what, I mean, I drive a big diesel truck and I love it, but I'm not going to lie, at our local mall, and I'm not trying to give away our location. We're in Southeast Texas, everybody, but at our local mall, they have a brand new Tesla, showcase thing where they say they're not salespeople, but whatever. They're arranging test drives. And I've never wanted an electric vehicle, but I have to say they're fascinating. The concept of my vehicle driving me around, that's an attractive concept.
Right.
I'm not really interested in it for the same reasons that a lot of people are. I still want to drive a like you said, right, something with, power and maybe a little bit of noise. But the automation aspect of it,
yes,
kicks into my laziness.
Lacey,
We can all relate to that. There's many times where I've been on the freeway driving a car and I'm like, I really am getting so tired. I do not want to have to downshift to pass someone. It's those moments. We have those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just, as far as Tesla goes, they're, I'm sure, wonderful cars and everything, but there's other options out there as well. We have Rivian, you have other different models. I'd love to see more international becoming available in the US because the market in China has such a diverse availability in the electric cars. But that's all something else we could talk about on a different podcast. Right now, let's focus on the things that I've been seeing in public. One thing I did want to kind of bring up is recently there's been talks. I don't see any action for it, but the NRA has even spoke out against it about removing the rights of trans people from owning guns.
Why?
Really?
That is one of those documents that go under the, they're putting it under the documentation of mental disorders. And, certain cases where if you are at risk of harming yourself or another person, you will get red flagged and they will confiscate them until you are seen by a psychologist and therapist and can be verified that you aren't a threat to yourself or to another person. And that's one of those things that is very scary to me to see coming up because in this administration, there's some things I absolutely agree with. We need a stronger economy. We need more jobs coming to the US, especially jobs that anyone can do from any point where you can just go and step into the job and learn how to do it.
Right.
Because not every student wants to go to university. Not every student wants to go to college, and they are expensive. I went through 3 years at college and then university. Now I made a mistake and I lost my scholarship, so I haven't finished my bachelor's, but I'm 1.5 years away and I'm planning to return next year.
Okay.
But, for these types of, events, I don't see removing rights from transgender individuals as something that we should be moving forward with, and again, it's just talks and statements. It doesn't, but
where does that come from? Because it's like that would be adjusting the Constitution for a subjective, very subjective assessment. Like there's no way, so forgive me, Lacey, at my ignorance about what I'm about to say. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Help me say this better and help me think this better. So a person can become trans, according to what I understand, whenever. It can be like that. There's no predictability. There's no way. Like, how can how can we alter our Constitution based on the possibility of a predicted choice? That's so speculative and so imaginary. Like you don't know when and see, like I've noticed something about you, and I'm going to go back to something that it's related to this. But I've noticed about you that you are living a life of fluidity, and that is bringing you balance. And the amazing thing about you personally, not everybody in the trans community or what have you, but you personally, there could come a time where you lay that down. It could happen. Not to say that you will, not to say that you have to, not to say that that's your journey, but you could.
Yeah.
You could do that. And how could an entity, a government entity, say that because your internal choices or your internal direction are this or that qualifies or disqualifies you from your right, your God-given right to keep and bear arms? How could that, that's bizarre to me. I hadn't heard that yet. You just brought up a whole new thing. Like that's, I can't get behind that one.
I can't either.
And I'm about as redneck as they get. And I
have you seen his truck?
Yeah. So
I'm curious about the truck. I want to know, is it?
It's a real one, but
everybody around town knows who it is. It's
I don't know, because if it's not a Ram, I might not like it. But
no, it's global.
Yeah, we're we're Ford men for sure. This is the first
my
time
father has one.
Okay, this is the first I'm hearing of this. I want to look into this.
Yeah, I've written it down. I'm going to look that up.
Because and thank you for bringing it to light, because I mean, where does it stop? Okay, I mean, they're not gonna pass legislation. It's not going to happen, but they're going to really make some trouble in the meantime. However, I mean, does it then transition to gay, to lesbian? I mean, where does it end?
Right.
Why would these people not be eligible to own a gun in a Second Amendment society? That doesn't make sense to me.
Can I ask you a crazy question?
Sure.
Is there a difference, categorically speaking, from your perspective? Is there a difference in gay or trans? Is it like I have a really hard time with that, and I don't mean that to be offensive, but
No, that's not offensive. That's actually a really good question. I fully get where you're coming from there. So yes, there is a difference. Trans is an identity on the way we present ourselves, as far as long hair, feminine features, and not everyone represents exactly feminine. And of course, it is a fluid thing. Some people can change at any time. You can live as transgender for a very long time. You can live as the gender you were born as for a very long time. I don't like using the term cis. I feel like it's unnecessary. It's adding things into things that don't need added. But in the terms of between being gay and trans is just an identity of how I dress, the things that I want to do, like as far as, any type of medical procedures and things like that. That is where that goes into. It has less to do with your sexuality than it does with your identity.
Okay. I really appreciate that you're so open about that. And I totally agree with you that they go too far. Like the cis thing, like that. I mean, why do we have to make it so complicated? It's like that example I gave about the lady at the hospital with her aggressive, presentation. What is the purpose behind that? It's almost as if we're making up new things to be upset about.
Right. Behind the purpose of that, I feel like it's part of a community that may have felt offended constantly being transgender, because I identify as a transgender woman. That is what I will say. I will not ever say I identify as a woman. I always let it know transgender, especially anytime I'm talking to someone online, maybe something like that, because I would never want anyone to not know the full truth. I would never want to meet someone with any type of deceit or facade behind it. I want to be honest and true to who I am, and even at any step through my process, because in Texas is a little harder for me to go through with some procedures and get the care I need. But there is ways to do it. And I'm looking at finally getting health insurance again this November, so I can qualify with the company I'm with and all that stuff. So I'll be looking at what options I have then. But, it's one of those things where it's a lot of internal work to be able to come to the point I'm at. And I understand whenever people aren't there, because it's a journey. Everyone has their own journey, and everyone's way to process things is different. And it comes from, the way you're grown up, the way you're taught, the way just who we are as people, it's each and everyone's own little perspective. So for me, I like to be able to respect one another. And I don't feel, putting a term in front of, so if I refer to, you, Robert, as, that type of, you're a cis man, I feel like that is trying to create an offensive term for you, because you're just Robert, you're a man, that's how it is. And I am Lacey, a transgender individual who identifies as a trans woman, and that's where that big
I can appreciate
difference
that
is.
because you say it in such a way that it's not aggressive, it's not argumentative, and you're presenting your own definition. You're not trying to change my definition.
No,
you're just telling me what you see.
Exactly.
Historically, and I presume a lot of our audience is learning a lot today, because we hear a lot of these identifiers, but thank you for helping us, Lacey, because a lot of people truly don't know what they specifically mean. I'm sure they're living mostly off assumptions. But transgender, as compared to, say, transsexual, are they cousins? Are they completely different? I mean, and this is just
they held hand on the bus.
They held hand on the bus. They favor in the family photos. I don't know, man. But so for transsexual, what more does that mean? I suppose.
Let me go to Google on that one, because I'm not even fully external on that one, because the terms get deep.
Yes.
So it's kind of the same as far as what the description is, transsexual versus transgender. Both of them kind of fall into the same category, I guess.
Okay.
I fall more into the terms because it's kind of like the term queer, I guess. We can identify as queer or think something like that. It's a term that is often used, especially in politics. If a politician doesn't want to, say they're gay, they'll say they're queer. I've seen that a lot.
Does it bother you?
Queer?
Yeah.
No, it's everyone's identity. It's how everyone wants to present themselves. It sounds like certain terms sound more professional and more inclusive than others.
Right.
Transgender, because gender truly is what's outward projection. Sexual identity and things like that goes into like the biological norm.
Okay.
When I go to a doctor, of course they understand, I understand. And I've had my moments with doctors where I've been kind of where a moment was like, you're not really looking at the real issue, especially last November when I went and was seen. I got told I was most likely had AIDS, had hepatitis, or was a chronic alcoholic and needed help in a program. Mind you, I've done all those programs. I've stepped away from that. And what happened is I'd already been tested for hepatitis because I was working construction at the time. And there was a moment where I got like stabbed with some stuff that I needed to, they just ran the test. That was all negative. And of course, I am always up to date on any type of adult activity testing and stuff like that. I'm very conscious about my physical health. So I knew none of that was true. And so, I had to go to another clinic, get that second opinion. Still never really found out what was going on with my liver. We're still trying to figure it out. I just don't have the funds to do even further testing because I need to see a specialist for it. So right now it's just, dietary, exercise, and staying off alcohol and things like that, just so I don't do anything excessive, even avoiding Tylenol or acetaminophen or anything medication that isn't necessary. If I have a headache, I try to push as long as I can to the point where it's later in the day, I can just go to sleep, and sleep the headache off. If not, if I'm at work and it's like early in the morning and I've already had my coffee, I've had food, and it's like that stress headache, I will take a medication. Like I'll take a couple Tylenols because there's no avoiding it. And I'll have to take that hit so I can get through my day. Because I am the type of person, I will work through almost anything. I will not call off work unless it's an absolute necessary emergency situation. So we end up in like that types of situations where a lot of times in certain areas, I may be turned away from medical attention. Transgenders, we struggle in our life, and understanding these terms and getting out there and talking about it, I feel is a way to prevent the younger people, the people who are just starting their journey, from having to suffer the same things I may have suffered. People back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was happening then. It wasn't as big in media. It was still around the same amount of people in the US. The percentage wise was still kind of prevalent to what today is, as far as, people that would identify as transgender or transsexual, because again, that is everyone's journey to identify with what term they feel. So, for me, transsexual, I feel like that kind of goes into a deeper subset, for those who may have gone through different procedures possibly. So if I haven't done those, I'm still gender identity, I'm presenting. So that's a difference there.
So I had never thought about this. You brought up something that's pretty crucial. You said that you had been denied medical care, or that you know of people that have. You said that's a thing. Just because someone says, like, forgive me, okay, I'm gonna go back to my redneck roots just a little bit here for a second. But if I dress up like a woman and grow my hair out and put on makeup and I walk into an emergency room, they might not care for me because I dress opposing to what I was born with.
Yeah.
Is that
That
true?
can happen. That is true. That can happen, and that does happen. I believe there was an act recently that our current administration has worked to reverse some protections to prevent things like that from happening,
That's
and
crazy.
It is.
hand it over to state control. But yeah, so some doctors, if they don't agree with your lifestyle, some medical practices, if they don't agree with your lifestyle, can say, um, if it's not life threatening, if you're not in an emergency situation, can turn you away from treatment, can say, well, I'm not really going to treat that. Or they can say, thank you, but I just have too many patients. There's ways for them to do it without basically creating a type of case against them. For
Oh,
me, I'm not going to go against a doctor. If a doctor says they don't want to treat me, then I wouldn't want them to treat me, obviously.
of course.
But my situation, it wasn't that they denied me care. They denied looking deeper into the problem.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, and I had to seek another clinic and get other additional help because I was in the emergency room, so they had to run the tests and everything, and it was just the diagnosis was nothing that was true. And I was like, look, they didn't test my blood for any type of HIV or AIDS. They didn't test me for hepatitis. Obviously they didn't know that I like gone through my control of alcoholism, and it's very easy for them to be lied to about how much a person's drinking.
Yeah.
But they never did those testings, and they came to those conclusions and handed me those possible reasons without testing for it.
Hmm.
So it's one of those moments where it's like, you can't say just because I do interact with same sex that um, I have a disease that is causing these issues. You can't say that, you know, at the end of the day, if I state that those aren't there, and it's something you can very quickly, there's rapid tests for both of those that you get results back within just a few minutes. If you're not going to do a rapid test, you can't give that kind of diagnosis. That's
Right.
not how medical practice works. Um, I mean, sure. I forget your name. Apologies, doctor. What is your name?
Oh, Chuck.
Dr. Chuck. Dr. Chuck can understand that. You know, you can't just give a diagnosis without going deeper into studies, tests, and understanding.
That's right.
So,
Wow.
you know,
How unfortunate that those scenarios exist, you know, and because at the end of the day, there's a person with a need, you know, and you know, who are we to deny them those needs? You know, that's I don't know. Unfortunate is the best word I can come up with. I could go stronger, but you know, that's not a platform for that.
So I've got a question for you, and this is actually I've got two questions, but they're not really related. So a lot of times when a person lives a different lifestyle or has a different way of being or different belief systems, people on the outside looking in will ask this particular question. They'll even ask it of a person who has a genetic difference or a metabolic difference, or say, for instance, a person with Down syndrome, which I love people with those extra chromosomes. I love them. I think they're beautiful. But or like people with autism. People will ask this question, okay? So I'm not asking you, I'm just using it as an example. They will say to you, they will say, well, what is wrong with you? Or what happened to you? So the question I have for you in that regard is there a moment in your life where an event took place that you can relate your lifestyle to?
oh, that's interesting. And thinking back, I've actually thought about this a lot of times, you know, especially through my journey with my recovery processes and the therapy and things like that. There is never really an event that I go back to. It's just always been that way for me. I've always felt that way. I remember being that little kid who liked to wear the heels, who liked to put makeup on, who wanted to be more like mommy and grandma and them, but I still liked things grandpa and dad and them would take me to do. I still love fishing and all that stuff. But there was never really a direct event that I could go back to that this is what happened. There was the events where I was able to come to terms with myself, where I was, you know, living outside of my home, you know, my family home. I was living, renting a room, becoming an adult because I did move out at 17. So I started, you know, that journey pretty early on to becoming a, you know, progressing adult as a young person. but there was never really a major event where I felt like that happened to me or that's where I could go back to do that. It's just always been that way, ever since I was a child. My mind has not been wired exactly the same as others. And even whenever I was able to start hormones, when I originally was on them, I was on them for about 8 months in Las Vegas before I moved out to Texas. But when we did my first hormonal tests, with my endocrinologist and all that stuff, my testosterone was less than what my estrogen levels were naturally.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. It was naturally less than what they would normally be with men and women. The doctor said if I put this test next to someone or gave this without any description of the patient, they would most likely say we're looking at a geriatric or an older woman's tests. So like a woman that's entering menopause is what my test referred to without me being on anything. And, I'm not someone like, I may be thinner, but thankfully the Lord has given me one of the most amazing metabolisms. I literally eat about 5,000 calories a day and I stay at 140, 150. Right in that range. I eat whatever I want, whenever I want. So it has. I can understand that. My family is not happy with me about it. They all look at me. They're like, "Why are you so skinny?" And yet you have eaten more food than everyone here. Especially when we were all spending long time together. Whenever we were living together, they would see me. I'd wake up. I'd have something in the morning to eat. A couple hours later, I'd eat something else, and then I'd have snacks in my pockets. I'm just always eating.
I will survive longer in the Arctic than you will. So I got
facts. Yeah. I avoid cold places until I'm going snowboarding, and then at that point, I'm just fully bundled up in gear.
So take that, skinny one.
Yeah.
So I said I had two questions, and thank you for answering that so well. And the second one is, in our society, we hear a lot about education, dealing with our kids and things like that. Do you think, in your perspective, from your point of view, is it appropriate to teach kids about transgender in school? Is it appropriate for a teacher or a quote unquote public educator? Public. I want to make sure I say that. A public educator. Is it appropriate to discuss things like that?
And
gender
so
or sexuality at all?
This is a great question. I was really hoping we would be able to touch on this, because even from the community that I interact with, my online friends and everyone that I talk with, we all see very eye to eye on this. No.
Thank you.
It is
oh my gosh, thank you.
I will start there just straight out. But we should definitely keep kids to let them teach them to accept one another. Let's end bullying. Let's end, the oppressive type of behaviors between kids. We don't want our kids fighting, or we don't want anyone's kids being felt any type of sadness or depression or anything like that just because they're going to school and getting made fun of for the way they dress or the way they talk or where they act. So when it comes to that type of thing, it gets a little deep there. I do not believe any child in elementary should be taught anything about any type of sexuality. There should be none of that there. Of course we have our movies and our shows and things like that. And movies are kind of becoming more inclusive. And I really love seeing inclusive movies, because growing up, you do see a lot of the heteronormative behaviors, and those are what we normally see. And it's nice to see inclusivity in that, to let other kids know it's okay. The public accepts you, that way, when there is a kid that's like myself, they don't have to struggle with themselves as much. You don't have to be 8, 9 years old afraid to be who you are because you're not sure what's going to happen at school, or if mom and dad are going to throw you out on the street or something like that. Those fears are real. But when it comes to teaching any type of sexuality, and this in my life, I came out right around when my sisters started having their kids, my nieces and my nephews. And I have always been Aunt Lacey. They do not need to know anything further than that. And that's that. They don't need to know all that other stuff. That is something that they don't know about. I don't bring people around all the time. If I'm dating someone, I'm really protective of my nieces and nephews, especially with my niece and nephew Ollie and Rosie, what they've gone through and through their childhood is something no child should ever go through. They are currently with my mom and dad. My sister, she rests and she is with us every day,
What
no
took
matter where
her, if
we
you don't
are.
mind me asking?
Uh-huh.
How did she leave? What happened?
So a few years ago in 2019, there was an accident out in Southeast Texas, and I can send you the article, but she was driving somewhere. There was a lot of things going on. She ended up getting into a car accident under an overpass, and she was able to save both my niece and nephew. The way that the police said they found her was she was holding their car seats down, and she was gone on the scene.
Wow. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss and for their loss, for your whole family. That is tragic.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, shameless plug for you, Chuck, the way that Chuck and I became partners and how this show originated, we became friends because Chuck was the grief counselor for my wife and I.
Okay.
Through the death of a child.
Oh.
So if ever you or anyone else out there should so desire, Chuck has an online class that is a grief therapy group, and you can be on there. You can be anonymous. You can be silent. You don't have to participate. You can just log in and learn from it and grow from it and glean from it. Yeah. So how do they find you on that?
They can go to my website, Chuck Olliff, spelled Olliff as in football, chuckolliff.com. And it says free grief class. You can register and it is free. There's no charge. And we meet for 7 consecutive weeks on Tuesdays. We do that 4 times a year. So that's for you, Lacey, and for your family, and of course anybody who may be tuning in today. There's an endless supply of folks that come on, and they're all muted, cameras turned off. They just listen to me and try to give them some helpful information. So
quite the opposite of this.
Quite the opposite of this. It's not interactive, which it's more like a class than a group. There's not a discussion, and I think I've found more people like that. They may have questions later. They contact me off the air, but when we're on Zoom, it's just kind of turn it on and put it in your ear and go fold your clothes and wash your dishes and just listen to what we have to share. So yeah, if your family, if anybody's struggling or just would like to maybe go a round or two and listen to some of the information, they are more than welcome.
Well, I'm sorry to have interrupted you, and thank you for sharing your story about your sister.
Yes.
So back to where you were headed with that, about sexuality with kids and teaching them that stuff.
Right. Absolutely. And I love that you do that, Dr. Chuck. But yeah, so with kids, the way I see it, whenever I entered, I believe my first sexual education class was in 7th grade or 8th grade, one of those two. And my parents had to sign off on it. They were given what we're going to be taught, as far as like the birds and the bees and how babies are made and how they're born. And we saw videos and things like that. And your parents, typically you have the permission. If you say no, the students do a different course. They don't do that. Now, that's where I feel, in those courses, if the parent consents to it, kids should be taught about the risks with same-sex interactions. They should be taught about those risks. But as far as identity goes, that is an identity thing, and that should be private. That's a journey for them to talk to their counselor about. If they're not comfortable talking to their parents about, they should still be given some type of privacy, as long as they aren't in direct talk of possibly harming themselves or doing anything to hurt them or another person, then there's no need to involve a parent in that discussion. And that's kind of how I feel about that, because you never know what a child's home life is like. And if you're in a home where they don't agree with that lifestyle, that's okay. Your parents, people don't have to agree with it. And kids can very easily be, put in a bad position with their family if that gets out and they're not comfortable with that. That's a discussion and a journey for them in their home. Now, I don't believe any type of child should be given medication. That you can be talking to a therapist as a kid in that situation, but you should not be given medication behind a parent's back. You should not be given no types of treatment, and kids should not be taken from their parents just because their parents don't want them to live that lifestyle. There's reasons behind that. It's a tough lifestyle. Maybe they want their kid to actually just grow up first, kind of fill life out, explore the journey because it's a fluid thing, and now if as far as like, children being taken by CPS and things like that, there's reasons for that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
lately, it's especially with the way the media is portraying it, it feels like they're kind of overstepping in certain boundaries. We should not be going and taking someone's kid just because mom and dad don't want their daughter to dress like a boy every day, or that they don't want them to be
Yeah.
on medication. That is not right. That's their journey for them to work in their own way. And as long as the parent isn't physically harming their child, isn't depriving them of what is necessary to survive, such as like food and water, isn't removing their ability to have any clothing or clean hygiene products and things like that, that's there's no point for the state to get involved. There's no point for the government to be involved in that. That is private. That is not everyone's journey. My procedures, those are private, should be protected by HIPAA, such as, as I was talking with like the child length course, there's certain things up to a certain point, a parent isn't going to hear about what a child talks with their therapist unless it's in direct harm of themselves, if they're talking or doing something very risky, if they're seeing something like, that is showing major signs. Now, if the child's just like, I don't feel like the other boys and girls, I don't feel like this, and they're just talking, and they say, well, I've seen some stuff online and things like that. And if they mention, possibly talking to someone, that's where maybe let's get the parents involved. They're messaging people online, shouldn't be messaging people online. That's a very dark place to be. I've seen some stuff. My nephew plays video games. I've had to step in and grab the headset and be like, you're getting off the game right now. And I've got on there and like, listen, you should never say something like that to a child. That is so wrong. And then I'd block them and do all that stuff and step in. But I don't believe children need to be taught about sexualities under the certain
Thank you.
ages. Like,
That was
come on,
that's
people.
the gist of what I was looking for right there. And we, some kind of way, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the salaciousness of the topic in the media. Maybe it's how they're getting ratings. But there's this overemphasis on sexualizing children.
Yes.
Whether, I mean, what you do as an adult, that's your business.
Right.
But making the effort to sexualize a child, I don't really care what age they are in public education.
Right.
It's not the public education system's business to sexualize a kid.
That's right.
Like the way you said something earlier was very succinct, and I appreciate it. You said with the parents' permission about sex, even about sex ed, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
If the parent signs off on it, great. They can teach them about the anatomy, about babies, how they're made, about all that stuff. But they have no right, no business being of influence one way or the other.
Right.
And they have no right encouraging one thing or another.
No, exactly. It's not their place. Right. You're welcome. And that's what, and I feel out of all the transgender individuals or anyone in the LGBTQ community that I've ever interacted with, and I'm very active in like messaging groups, different things like that. Like I do get different views. None of them view that, none of them view that children should be being taught any of that. They all see the same way you and I are seeing, like we're seeing the same way. And that's where it's really starting to wonder, it's like, why is the media portraying this when this isn't what the community's actually working towards? What we're working towards is being accepted and being loved. Now, of course, if a child comes out and says their identity, as a child, that's where a step comes in where, should the teacher kind of talk with the parents about that? Maybe, but also let's get the kid with the counselor, see if it's a safe situation to talk about that, because if the kid says, well, if I said that at home, dad might hurt me. That's where it's going to be a little bit touchy per case. And that's where, let's leave that up to that counselor who is trained and professionally able to handle that, because we would never want to place a student in harm, but we're not going to take that kid just because dad might not agree with them. That's not what we're after with.
I've never had the privilege of getting to play the role like you were just inferring about, like a school counselor. Typically, I get brought in after reactions have been made and now they regret it. And they want me to help put the family back together. And I'm like, if you would have just called me ahead of time, this may have gone tremendously better. And I've had many of I don't know. I don't want to be very insulting here. Very generic or good old redneck men react to their daughters and then they lose them and they can't
Yeah.
get them back. And I'm like, what would make you think to say something like that? And now they're crying in my office like little children. And I'm like, and I really have a hard time having empathy because I'm like, no, your overreactedness, your fears, if you will, your insecurities just blew up in your face. And now that's what I want to say, but I have to be a little like, okay, we'll see what we can do. I try to be a little bit more platitudinal, but in my thoughts, I'm like, no. I'm sorry, but and then but one of the last things I often tell them, Lacey, I said, now that you've learned the hard lesson, go teach your friend, the guy that you work with, whose child you fear it has come out, or you probably anticipate they're going to come out. I said, teach them to do it better than you did, and they go, man, that's a good idea. I said, yeah. I mean, teach from your mistakes. My son, he was 22. His little sister was 9, and he came home and announced to his mother and I, that he was homosexual. And we're like, okay, and that's when we were able to say, hey, I love you. I don't fully understand it. Maybe you'll help us. But I did ask a request, and I'm so proud of him. I said, but I do have a favor. He said, yes, sir. I said, your little sister's 9. She's not going to understand. Not yet. She will as time moves on and we're able to help expose her. And when she is curious and has questions, will you come home and talk to her? He goes, absolutely. And then I ask him to do what you have also asked your friends to do, is when you're around my niece and nephew, contain yourself, because they're little, they don't understand. They will. Not long. About the time we understood, that's when they're going to understand. Those double-digit ages when they're 11 or 12 or 13 or maybe sooner. But let's give that a chance. And it worked out beautifully. He was very respectful of her, and they still have a good bond today, I believe, as a result of it. And so it can be done well. And I hope our audience is encouraged by that.
Absolutely. And I love that. And it doesn't even just go for me in my lifestyle. My brother was very the same. He lives a heterosexual life. He's married to my sister-in-law, who I love very much. We are very close. When he's dating and stuff, he's not bringing girls over. My nieces and nephews weren't seeing that. That's not something they need to see, because even in that, they don't understand it. They see grandma and grandpa, they're married, they are together, they are loving. We don't need to see kids don't need to see what dating life is like with their aunts and their uncles and the family members. Dating life that's something outside of that. We bring those individuals whenever they come is because we've been with them for a long time. We want them to meet our families at this point, to let them know, this is someone I really like. This is my friend. This is someone I'm seeing, but that's about it. That's all they know. Anything beyond that, nothing. My niece and nephew love to kind of put me with people sometimes, though. Like, they're getting to that age now where they're like, oh my God, is Auntie Lacey, is this your boyfriend? And I'm like, no, that is a friend. That is not my boyfriend. I don't date people right now. I've kind of put all that off to the side for a good bit.
Yeah. I love it. Well, they sure are wishing for the best for you then to find
They are.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, Lacey, look, I can't thank you enough for being a part of our show, for letting us learn about your life, about your views. Is there anything that we've missed? If you were in our shoes, what would you want to ask of you?
If I was in your shoes and to ask myself, I think we've pretty much got it. With recent events and all the things going on, I may not agree with everyone, but I do understand, how certain views can get so divided. Let's stop dividing one another. Let's start just uniting and being together as humans. Let's look at each other and be like, your lifestyle is your lifestyle. We all live under the same laws. We should all be judged under the same laws, because at the end of the day, when we cross that bridge, and may it be far in the future for all of us, that meeting is between me, God, you, God. Robert and God. It is not between everyone. It is not between the world and us. It is, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk. God knows everything I'm going to ask them, and they have all of the answers. I get to understand what the path was, understand that everyone's path in this life and everyone's pursuit to happiness is different. Everyone has that different purpose and that different lifestyle, and it's just same thing as the taste on our dinner tables and the taste in our furnitures. As long as you aren't out hurting someone, like we said, and driving a little reckless on the freeways, if they're empty, hey, I get a little speedy sometimes, but I never do it around other vehicles. But like, respect one another, protect one another, keep our children safe, keep the world loving and united, because at the end of the day, we all want a better economy. We all want to see the person at the gas station go on a vacation once a year. We all want to see the people working our fast food restaurants go to university and be able to afford university with their income from that fast food restaurant. We want to see the kids in high school grow up safe and sound. We don't want to see these events that are taking lives, that are pushing one another apart from each other. No one wants to see that. No one wants this to happen. No one wants to see someone lose their life because they're making a standpoint in their lives, in their points. That is one of those events that has really driven society into a direction that's kind of scary, especially with everything coming up. Seeing the speeches being given, they kind of raise some alarms to me at the funeral. I've seen them. I can understand where some of them are, but certain individuals with certain speeches in the current administration and the way it's going, it can be very scary. And right now, as a community, as a society, it's really important for us to band together and just show one another love, even if we're not from the same country. Even if we didn't come over here exactly the way we were supposed to. I mean, you, Dr. Why do I forget your name? I just, Dr. Chuck and Robert, you would never risk your family's life based off of a piece of paperwork. If you had to go somewhere, you would just go, as a provider and a protector of your family. Even your wives are providers and protectors in their ways as well. People in other countries may not have the ability to wait for that document. They may not have the ability to wait the 10 years, or they may not have the funds. Let's give some grace. Let's give some love to communities that may be being attacked right now or may be being persecuted, because we've seen that in the Bible. We've seen that persecution happen. We've seen the stories, and we know where Jesus was in that story. We know where God stood on that story. So let's give that grace. Of course, if someone's a criminal and has active warrants or has committed crimes, let's get that person off the street. But to the family working and showing up for their days, to the trans individual just going to work, paying their taxes, and doing what they can to provide for themselves, or people providing for the families, let's get some better opportunities to get them the documents they need to get them here properly, because we don't understand what's going on in those other countries. The media is not going to show us everything.
Well, I'm not going to fight you on that. We are not often given the whole truth.
That's right.
Very rarely. I'm going to tell you something that I really appreciate. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, or towards the beginning, that I am a conservative Christian, and those are that's the fundamental foundation for my views and beliefs. But you espoused one of the principal Christian tenets just now in your closing statement, and it was, to put it simply, judge not, lest you be judged. And that is the fundamental foundation for my outlook in the world right now. And it's how we operate this show. Mm-hmm. We don't operate the Pursuit of Purpose podcast with a sense of judgmental positioning in our show. We operate from a position of compassion, love, empathy, what if, and curiosity. Mm-hmm. That's where we come from. So we really appreciate you being our guest, for being so open and honest, for being willing to put yourself out there. That's a lot of courage.
It is.
It took a lot of courage, because I know that you went on and looked at my page, and I know that I'm not secretive about what I believe and how I think and the things I like and don't like. And I appreciate that you saw the balance in that, and that you were willing to put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. That means a lot to us. So everybody out there in the audience, we're going to go ahead and sign off now. Thank you for joining our podcast today. It's been a great episode. Lacey, you've been an amazing guest. Is there anything you'd like to tell the audience as we close?
Just keep loving each other, keep being open, and keep uniting the communities. That's the best way to go forward in our society.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, whether you like it or not, my Jesus loves you.
Indeed.
And I love Jesus.
So
I do have a quick question. That grandmother that you went to church with nearly every day, what was her first name?
Her name's Josefina.
Josefina. Well, she is, in all of your stories, you've done wonderful today, man. You've shared a lot of good stuff about a lot of beautiful people. Your sister, not the least of which, but your grandmother touched me the most. And I just, Josefina, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, she was the one, man.
You can tell she had a big impact.
She was the one. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so I want to give her a little credit right before we sign off. So thank you to her. I give her credit for you being here today, on our show and becoming our friend. So thank you to her.
Thank you. I love that.
Thank you, Lacey. For everybody out there in the audience, I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we've had with us
Lacey.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys very much. Y'all have a great day, and we will talk soon.